Right, welcome back, everyone. Now let's get back to the discussions, and the next one is dropping V1 API. Gautam, Stephen, would you like to share your thoughts on this?
Yeah, sure. You can hear me okay, yeah?
Yes.
Great. Yes, this is something that came out of the Open API work. The V1 API has been deprecated for quite a few years. I really only knew that it existed because of mistakes that we made in Gopher Cloud that ended up with it being used. As far as I'm aware, the initial version of the V2 API is effectively identical to the V1 API, similar to how the old V2 API in Nova behaves almost the same as the V2.1 base API. So that means the V1 API is giving us very little at the moment, other than additional complexity in code that nobody's looking at, and slightly trickier deployment, we'll say, with regards to just having to create an additional endpoint or multiple endpoints, depending on how you want to split it up. So unless we've a good reason to keep this around, I'd be eager to effectively just go and get rid of it. So I have patches that are up there ready for review. I see that they've gone into merge conflict since, but that should be pretty trivial to strip those out.
Gautam?
Hey there, and thank you for getting us started on this. And part of the reason I think is it's hurting us to keep this, given that we need new code being added, right? That's like our biggest motivation here. The reason to not remove it so far, has been it's an API and we've shipped it, and we don't know if somebody is consuming it. But this API has been deprecated since I think about 10 years now. Um, that's a long time, and that's where I think we have enough reason to do this. And there's prior art from other teams. The only thing I've heard though about that is that it's always been painful whenever it was done, because there was going to be some struggling use cases for this. In our case specifically, I think um, we've taken care not to document this API. So you can't find API reference for V1, for instance. We've taken care not to add any new tests to it, or to support anything that was supported in V1 with the CLI changes. And we've also not documented the any user guide on how to set up this, how to authenticate with this client, and with a client that's speaking V1 and so on. But the pain points are going to be trying to get rid of this in the code. Again, that is something that Stephen's handling, so I'm very confident it'll be handled well. But I still feel like if I were to do it, it's going to be very painful. The other part is the testing that we have for it. It has a lot of testing in Manila's Tempest plugin, just because of historic reasons. Again, because at the time when we were writing these tests, that was the only API version we were supporting. And then we started adding tests on top of that. So I feel like we need to switch those tests to V2, and then take care of this thing, and not really remove those tests, because anything that's available in the V1 API, as probably mentioned earlier, it is identical to the V2 API at version 2.0. It's just that the test code is explicitly calling the V1 API. That's what's going on. So that's something that we need to take care to do.
Yep, that makes sense. I've put a link in there for currently failing patches to do exactly what you said at the Tempest plugin, and to migrate everything over to using V2. Now, they're badly failing at the moment because this was effectively a morning's effort that I threw up in Gerrit with the intention to come back around to it at a future point, and it should probably be marked as work in progress. But yeah, I'm aware that needs to happen. With regards to breaking people, my usual statement, and that is we still have older versions of Manila that people are able to use and that will be supported for, I guess, 18 months or so after their release. So people can continue using the Flamingo release for the next 18 months or so, or slightly less. That's one. The other thing that they can do is these patches are pretty self-contained. There's only about 6 of them, I think, to remove most of the code. If people that were packaging and using upstream Manila wanted to, they can always just go and revert these patches and carry them themselves downstream for as long as they like until clients and stuff start removing things. I also don't think any of our clients actually support Manila V1 that I'm aware of. I think OpenStack SDK just supports what support for Manila is there in OpenStack SDK is just on the V2 API. And then the last point is it's been 10 years, as you say. It's a long time. So risk-wise, there may be some breakage, but some of that breakage is actually going to be a good thing because it's going to highlight places where people were using V1 when they thought they were using V2. And then the other ones, you've had 10 years of warnings. That's a lot of runway.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you. And thanks for getting us started on this. So what would help getting this in? And I was hoping we could try to get this in as soon as possible, like the first half of the cycle or even the first third of the cycle. And the reason that would be is just so we can hear about any issues and react to it, and we
Yeah,
have enough time.
yeah, definitely. I think getting the Manila Temper stuff up and running and getting that merged as soon as possible, that unblocks a lot of the later patches for the actual removal of stuff from Manila proper. So that should definitely happen as soon as possible. And then I'd agree, getting the other stuff in there, the actual stuff into Manila itself earlier or sooner rather than later would be good because we can, if we end up having to back it out or something for reasons, we have time to do that then.
Awesome. I've not been a part of kind of like a whole version API removal, despite being in OpenStack for like 7-8 years at this point. But I'm assuming that this would
We we
require an
we
email.
deprecated it before you started.
Yeah,
It's a good thing, huh?
yes, that seems like enough reason already to just remove it. But I'm assuming this would need an email and something to the OpenStack Discuss mailing list to get people a formal warning about the removal before we actually do it, right?
Probably no harm, although the way I probably word that is we're doing this. You know, be aware effectively as opposed to because people will come and tell us if they predict issues with it anyway. So I wouldn't be wording this as are you okay with us doing this? I'd be wording the email as we are doing this and just wait for people to come shout at us if it's going to break something really bad.
I think it was something very similar for deprecation of Cinder v2 API relatively recently, like a couple of years ago. Just statement, yeah, that's going to be gone, period. Do your work to migrate.
Yeah, exactly. And we're doing the same thing in Nova as well. The V2 API is the original like V2 shim that's there that makes V2.1 behave exactly like V2 with a load of validation and stuff stripped out. That's been marked as deprecated since Flamingo, I think. And in the H cycle, there'll be just an email sent that we're removing it, and then it'll be gone.
Cool. I'll keep that in mind. People tend to freak out when they see these removal emails, and then they just need change.
Yeah. And they can come and help maintain it if they do, or like I said, just carry the things themselves downstream. It's been 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Yeah, any questions regarding this removal or something else you guys would like to add to this?
I've got nothing else. It's pretty self-contained, as you've seen in the patches. It's pretty easy to strip all this stuff out, which is nice. Not as much tentacles as there is, for example, the Cinder v2 API, of which there's a lot of remnants still left in the Cinder code base.
Yeah.
And that's definitely going to make JSON schema work easier once it's gone.
Absolutely. Awesome. Yeah, this is something that while writing the JSON schemas, I don't know if struggled. And it was tough, but it will definitely help. I agree with that, and it's yet another good reason for doing this. Right, I don't have anything else to add to this myself, other than like the AI that I took for myself to send the email to the mailing list, just announcing that we will remove this. This is good timing as well, like this cycle. Yeah, another tick release. So awesome. Anything else you guys would like to add regarding to dropping the V1 API? Or should we switch to the next topic, which is the JSON schema validation stuff?
Nothing from me.
Great, thanks, and also taking our silence as no. Yeah, let's switch to the JSON schema validation. Yeah, Artem, Stephen, would you like to get us started on this?
So I can have. I think Artem's going to have a lot more to say about this than I will. I'll just briefly give my 2 cents on this. I haven't been massively involved in this from a Manila side, at least. I've been focusing on the Cinder and Nova side, and so a more Nova and Ironic side for the last few months. My observation as an outsider looking under this is we haven't made a whole lot of progress in terms of actually getting patches merged in here at the moment, and I'm slightly concerned that it's a bit like all the good work that we did on Manila integration into OpenStack SDK, where a lot of patches were proposed and they got maybe 80-90% of the way there, but they haven't quite got over the line, and then they ended up going into merge conflict, and they're either still hanging around there or they've been abandoned in recent years. We probably, I don't know, I know that you meet some bit regularly to do review-a-thons, or I forgot what the term is that you use for them. It probably would make sense for some of these to actually drag them over the line. I've made a start once on 1 or 2 of them where I've just pulled them down, patches that haven't been touched in 2 or 3 months, and we're almost there. Pulled them down, made the necessary fixes, and pushed them back up, ready for review. But I don't know how scalable that is. But it might be a way to get that last 10-20% of things that I needed in a few of these patches and get a good few of them merged. Because I think we've only maybe 3 or 4 of them merged so far, despite weekly meetings and stuff. That's my outside observation on this so far. But Artem and
yeah, I
yourselves have been
totally
more
agree
involved.
with you. We have more or less pretty much the same observation, or at least I do. Jonathan is working. It feels like really they stuck. So a bit of motivation is also missing, or losing motivation to continue working on that.
Yeah, need to get stuff in to get that. And Jonathan's on the call as well, I think. So it obviously helps with motivation if you actually see stuff getting in. Yeah, when we've done this in the past on different efforts, it's been a case of, like I said, grabbing the things and kind of tidying up those last few bits, because you can get kind of stuck in a review doom loop of sorts where you leave feedback, some of it's addressed but not all of it, all of it's addressed and there's more feedback and stuff, and you end up with 100 and something, well, not necessarily 100 and something, but you can end up with dozens of revisions on the thing and feeling slightly lost. Sometimes it does help for people to just step in and yank it over the line and get it in, or at least get it in and then focus on the fixes and stuff afterwards. Got them.
Hey, yes, thank you. And I think the last thing that you said is exactly what we might need to do over here. So have these review jams, and probably when things are not, we don't really need to leave a lot of comments and wait for the feedback. I think just doing what you did, which was refreshing the patches ourselves, and probably if these were minor fixes, go ahead and doing those. It's not going to take away from the author's attribution in any way. It's only going to make things faster to get things merged. And if folks are okay doing that, I think it's something we can do.
Yeah, I think so. I have attempted to tackle this from a slightly different angle with linters, but Artem will talk about this as well. This is, I think, a big part of his like AST project and code generator. There's so many different ways to implement a particular validation scheme in JSON schema. It is quite difficult to write a validator or a linter will say that enforces a single way of doing things, because it would be nice if we were able to say the entirety of OpenStack should use this style. This is how we validate nullable strings, for example, and all IDs should use this particular scheme of validator and stuff like that. But I thought it would be easy. It wasn't.
Yeah. I would rather say I have gave up on the idea, or at least on the hope to actually get OpenStack aligned on the standards. We have seen in multiple occasions that this never really works. Neither with OpenAPI, nor with API, nor with API guidelines, nor from the SDK side. So it's just we see that every team is still having their own smaller preferences. So from the code generator side, I still tried to address as much as possible. There are, of course, particular use cases where things are not working at all. Technically speaking, what you say in JSON schema, there are ways how to do additional validation with like really implementing the if then else conditions. This is something that on the generated code you would be never able to generate something like a SDK CLI for that, because, well, it's conditional schema is really an incredibly ugly thing. So, but that is a question not really for now designing the schemas, but rather for general API design. Sometimes it makes sense, of course, to do it to do the validation, but it's more really the API design patterns. But again, on that topic, I think with Antonio or with Aurea, we were trying. I think it was on somewhere in the Keystone area. We tried to implement like an if-else condition inside of JSON schema, with a clear statement that this will never end up on the client side. This is just the schema validation that would be performed on the server side, but it has absolutely no effect on the clients, on the generation of the clients, with maybe the only exception that, technically speaking, when we generate something like SDK and CLI, we would be able, after getting user input, to validate the input that user has given, basically prepare the JSON and enforce the schema validation on the client side before we even really send it to the server side, just to save us round trip. But I'm not sure how really helpful that is. And also one of the things that I have also seen in that particular regard, at least Cinder is making life pretty complex in the way that you are able, no, it's not Cinder, Glance, in the way that every cloud is able to modify the schemas. So it's technically, I think most of you know, on Glance you can send arbitrary properties for an image and they would be really just persisted on the server. And then there is a set of APIs for updating the schemas, which sounds really great if you think about that, but from the client point of view, it is an absolutely insane job. Just imagine you are trying to create a CLI that would need to work with multiple different clouds, and on one cloud you have one schema, on another cloud you have a different schema. So just please try to keep this in mind. This may sound great, but it makes life much more complex than it should be.
Agreed. And I think there was one other thing though about the additional properties thing. It is something. I mean, it's not the same example that you're using for Glance, but there is one issue with almost every schema that you're writing into Manila, right? One the aspect that the body allows any kind of key value pairs to be put in,
Yep.
and the API just ignores it. And so we're having to add to do notes, trying to I mean, for a future point saying we should fix this. The API should strictly validate the body, and I think that's worth investing time into. I just don't know how you're handling it in other projects, perhaps, and if we could use the same approach.
I wouldn't say really handling it in any different way. Well, technically speaking, we are in the relatively similar situation on the Keystone side, that after adding pretty basically being nearly complete on the schemas, and then all of a sudden figuring out there was some undocumented behavior which was broken with JSON schemas. Stephen actually found that. And then we were able to, so to say, return the old behavior by making schemas not that strict, to relax those restrictions. With an agreement, okay, we most likely at certain point in time we would need to start a new API version, and that is the moment where those would definitely go away. So within one.
The other point to note as well that the patch I don't think is merged against Keystone yet, but the way that we talked about this for Manila in the past and the way that other projects work, response validation, that's not something that you want turned on in your production environment. We turn that on for like Tempest jobs and stuff like this, with the idea being that you're not going, like, effectively if you do response validation, by the time you get to the validation of the response, you've already generated the response, which means you've already had side effects, because most operations aren't idempotent, at least if they're push or patch or whatever. So you're okay with that being the case in a DevStack environment where you're just testing things? You obviously don't want this to happen in a non-DevStack environment in a production cloud. So.
Yeah, but this is still a pretty complex topic. I'm currently fighting at my job with a relatively similar situation. It's not really coming from the JSON schemas point of view. It's more coming from pydantic models, or technically on your code side, you are using certain strict models for dealing with resources. And then you still have database where on the database side, you do not have those validations. And it's quite often that due to reason like a broken process, some exception was thrown somewhere, and those entities in the database end up really being not fulfilling the schema anymore. And quite often that basically you try to list resources and you get back 500. So this is happening literally very often. And again, it's not something that really does has the problem on the JSON schema. It's just architectural problem that for some reason or a different reason you would definitely have some deviations, and you need to find a way how to deal with them without breaking the user that would be not able to simply even to list resources.
Yeah, but to be clear, the 500 is coming because response party validation is kicking in.
Yeah, Steven, but I literally mean that at my work I have the same problem from the completely different angle. We are not doing any JSON schema validation, but there are pydantic models being used, which is honestly speaking then kicking again on the side of like you have the JSON schema as an expectation what the server would return from an SDK, from a CLI point of view, from any client point of view, and all of a sudden you receive back something which is not fitting in. With the Python, it's eventually not really that big problem, but with strongly typed languages, Rust, Go, it's a big problem. And I do not really know what's the proper process here. At least I'm trying currently at my work to do it a little bit differently. So do the schema validation on the response, or well, anyway, you are reading data from the database and you need to pass it into some model, into some class type, whatever that you are passing by. But then be more careful that if only single entry not matching the schema, then just filter out this entry and explicitly raise a warning error in the log file, but don't really block. From the OpenStack point of view, yes, we should try not to do schema validation for the responses at all, at least definitely not in production. But I wouldn't say that I want to prevent that people think that schema validation for the responses is bad. Is crucially important, but there is just this thing you need to keep in mind.
Gotcha. Yeah. That for me implies a bug in the service that probably needs an online data migration. And I mean, that because we've had similar things in Nova way back when I was working more regularly on that, and it was online data migrations and then changes to our server, like our logic on the server side, to prevent us creating new entries and maybe the addition of like stricter checks, making fields non-nullable and stuff like this.
Yeah. Due to that, when I'm generating CLI or actually the Rust types for all of the services, I'm trying to explicitly be more, I wouldn't say verbose, but be less restrictive. And for example, at least in certain cases, if the response declares it is Boolean, then we all perfectly know those use cases, even also in Nova, when everything what's declared as Boolean can be in reality also a string containing simply a Boolean. So you are never really that sure. So on the client side, I'm trying to be less restrictive and at least implement some additional logic on how to treat those responses. And the same is also actually valid for requests for actually query parameters. When you say query parameter is a Boolean, because over the wire you can't transfer Boolean, you are simply transferring true or false. So in reality, this is most likely even a string that can be casted as a Boolean. So instead of really saying Boolean, maybe you should say, well, it is something that I would need to be explicitly casting as a Boolean.
Yeah, makes sense.
But yeah, guys, for you, it just we need some progress.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nice way to round that out. Yeah. We're like, okay, don't worry about all of this. We just merge our patches right now.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And sorry about the laggard response in this thing. We're actually, I mean, it totally enjoyed working with the folks that are contributing to this. That we've been looping in more folks, and I think I don't know if we have folks from the Valencia College here.
Yeah,
So
Rian's
we've been
here.
doing an yeah. Hi, Rian. So we've been having another internship with Valencia College with a few more students there, and they're starting to add some JSON schemas. That would be more of the reviews that we ought to get to.
Yeah, but on that side, you definitely need to start then doing more of orchestration. Who is working on what? Because that
Mhm.
I think Jonathan faced that situation that he started working on something, and then all of a sudden someone else also started working on that.
Yeah.
Everyone is falling into the same problem with regards to V1 and terrible inheritance. But yeah, so like you need to spend
Yeah.
some orchestration time.
We'll sequence this work for ourselves. So the V1 stuff, we'll try and get it done within the next few weeks. And and of course, if you're hitting issues with that, and if it's because a particular API is very hairy, it has V1 parts in V1, etc. Hold off on working on that until we get those V1 bits removed. As we're speaking, there's code changes that are getting refreshed and such that will end up getting merged, and your life will become easier uh, when you're working on that code.
Yeah. Maybe from the process point of view, I feel like really it doesn't make sense for when a single change tries to make a full implementation for a single resource. It just becomes overly complicated. Instead, in one change, try to address only single API endpoint, and eventually even just consider that uh, a single change addresses only a single microversion or range of microversions. And then you do another change on top of that, which is adding support for next microversions, just to keep the changes smaller, because really those complex changes with Jonathan that we were having, it makes also life for you as a reviewer much more complex. So just try to keep things as small as possible, even overwhelming Garrett with changes. No one cares about that.
Yeah, 100% agree. Garrett's not a person, so no need to hurt its feelings.
Yeah,
Worry
just
about
that
its feelings.
running CI and waiting for those results like 3-4 hours, that is what's also incredibly annoying.
Yeah. Okay, we'll take that advice even to the Valencia College internship stuff. And in terms of sequencing the work, I think we've been relying on a Taiga board that hopefully will survive past the end of the year, or we'll try to find an alternative. It's for us has helped answer that same question, help people identify what needs to be done. And then assign themselves to it, tell us what's going on, kind of thing, interact with us through it. It's not an official OpenStack way of doing things, but it's working, and I don't mind us just using that for this project until it's completed, kind.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can get everybody access to the board. There was one issue that we've hit recently, is that we to not add all of the APIs mapped as in, like having cards to the Taiga board. So there were APIs that were not represented on Taiga, and then it's difficult to keep track of everything that, like it's being worked on. So more recently we started looking at those more carefully. But yeah, maybe we can use Taiga more actively for all of these issues so that we don't run into changes that other people already picked up at some point. That's it's not ideal that happens, and we apologize for making it happen.
Regarding also that stuff, I think what may be useful is that when still like more experienced people or people with a little bit more experience already into adding schemas can create first changes just cover the basic microversions, and then you put less skilled people or people with less experience to just add in the next revisions, add support for next microversions, because the most complex thing from what I have seen are actually not the schemas themselves, are the tests, making tests working. And with the first change, you would typically rework everything and ensure that there is already properly functioning tests for that, and just adding new micro versions. So at least in my eyes, I was feeling like it could be easier done this way.
I agree. Awesome. So there are a couple of action items for us here as well. First is reviewing and possibly doing a review jam to try to get these changes merging faster. The next one is organize the way that we are tracking this, because yes, it's been kind of a mess. And we can break up these issues on Taiga or whatever we decide to have the issues hosted at. We can split up into like smaller cards and then divide the work with that, and it's easier also for the newcomers to just pick up something that's smaller, and also helps us on reviewing the changes indeed. So thanks for all the advice, and also thanks for helping us and being always available in the meetings, like the weekly meetings that we have with like Jonathan, Honorin, all the people, and also to the Valencia students, everyone that has been working on this, at like helping this moving. Yeah, I'll try to get more pressure on the reviews and like having this merging faster.
Thanks.
Awesome. Any other thoughts you'd like to add to the JSON schema validation?
No.
Great, thank you. So I sent an invite that would that was until like 2 minutes from now, but I realized that I chatted with Stephen briefly about something in the OpenStack Manila channel on IRC a couple of weeks ago, which was regarding the possibility of merging the Manila client OSC into OpenStack client itself. So if you have some time and you could stay for that discussion, and also like the next one that we intend to have, which is supposed to be quite fast, which is the Manila client removal. We've talked about this. It's about the legacy client. So that's the next two things that we are going to discuss. If you can stay,
Yeah, sure.
awesome. Thank you. All right, so Manila client removal. This is not something new that we discussed, and then we mentioned we would attempt the removal of the client in the previous release. We didn't get that completed, and it's possibly something that should be done in the beginning of the cycle as well, just because it's one of those things, like that. Oh, if someone notices it or is relying too much on it, they can fall back to the newer approach that we have, which is the OpenStack client. Uh, we reached feature parity. I think it was on the Z release. Like feature parity. I mean, we had the Manila client itself, which is the Manila comments, and then we managed to reach the parity with the OpenStack client and stopped actively developing the Manila client in the Z release. So it's been a couple of releases since we wrapped up the parity, and then we talked about removing the support or removing the Manila client altogether, meaning that people won't be able to use it anymore. And this is pretty much enough notice at this point, I would say. So yeah, I think that the next step is actually send the email and about announcing the removal, and then also like possibly link a patch or a change or something like that already. So this is something that we can do this next cycle. This is possibly a very good this is a very good timing for it. Previous cycle was also good, a good plan for it. But yeah, that's the update we have on the Manila client removal. We can switch to merging the Manila client OSC functionality into OSC. Yeah, so Stephen, would you like to share some thoughts on this? Or sorry, let me stop for a second. Do you
Yeah.
have questions on the Manila client removal? Hearing silence says no. Yeah, we can continue. Sorry, my bad.
Sweet. Yeah. So the reason that I'm looking at doing this is not the biggest part of it, but a not an insignificant part of OpenStack client slowness is having to search through all of our entry points every time we start up. The Neutron project is moving all of their Stadium projects, individual OpenStack client things for other reasons, but they're moving all of those into OpenStack client proper. I think Manila is involved and like important enough from an OpenStack perspective that it probably should just be in there as well. Especially if we're getting rid of the legacy shell application. So I've started writing down what the plan is for this, and I'll continue writing afterwards. But the way that I propose going at this is to effectively run the same lints and stuff over Manila client that we currently use in OpenStack client. The rationale being that it allows us to copy the code across, hopefully pretty much unchanged with the exception of imports, and maybe using slightly different utilities in some places where they duplicate stuff that OpenStack client itself already provides. But it would allow us to copy all of those across and visually diff the changes to make sure that it's effectively a copy of what's there. And then to rework OpenStack client so that it stops searching for, like, it ignores basically the entry point from Manila for the legacy client, so that there isn't conflicts in the case that you have both packages installed. Governance wise, I would suspect this is the same as how things work with Neutron, and no changes and stuff at the moment, where Neutron cores, I think you guys as well all have, if you maybe you don't actually, but you would have for OpenStack SDK, you'd have +2 rights, and then over time we'd be hoping to expand, and then at the moment it's probably just Artem and myself that have +W rights, and we'd be hoping that over time that would expand. The only reason that we've done that in the past is to ensure that basically there's some kind of focus on consistency across projects, and we don't have multiple projects implementing effectively the same, like a quota command in 5 different ways, for example. And then from an actual implementation perspective, I imagine that we would add a new dependency on Manila client, the library, as opposed to Manila client, the shell utility. So that all of our underlying things would be using Manila clients initially, and naturally over time then we'd be migrating those to use SDK and eventually get rid of the Manila client dependency again. Because I'm assuming you're getting rid of Manila client, the shell utility, the legacy shell utility. You're not going to be getting rid of Manila client, the library yet.
Yes, and that was the bigger concern, for sure. Like, right now the OSC client in Manila client is relying on the Manila SDK.
Yeah.
Manila client
I think
SDK.
that would have to stay that way because it doesn't really make sense to migrate that to SDK where it is at the moment. And it also doesn't make sense to do that migration to SDK at the same time that we're copying everything across, because it's already going to be quite a few patches to move all of the, like, Manila clients there's quite a lot of commands there. So it's already going to be a relatively substantial series of patches to individually migrate all of the shares and all the share types and all the share servers and whatever other commands across, without layering in a migration to SDK. So my suggestion would be to move it, effectively add the code as is, but previously formatted so that we don't have to be applying rough and everything and things looking differently. do all of that, and then worry about migration to SDK. Keep it simple.
Totally makes sense. I am wondering if if this would be followed by other OSC plugins, or it's not a concern as such, that we're just going to use that.
I'd like to see I'd like to see pretty much all of them move to do this. Neutron is the first one going this way, rather than Neutron Stadium projects. And what is in Neutron Client, they still have a couple of advanced features, we'll say, in Neutron Client that aren't part of OpenStack Client. All of those should be getting merged in this cycle. I'd also like to see the same thing happening for Designate clients and Octavia clients and Watcher clients and various other projects. The reason I'm talking to you first is because I've been doing stuff on Manila lately. So, and it's a larger CLI, we'll say, than the Designate and Octavia CLIs are.
And because you jump through in different projects and apply rough everywhere.
Yeah.
Reformatting stuff.
Yeah, we need that patch. I think it's currently in much conflict. But yeah, I mean, the governance concern that will persist, I think. I mean, I think we all have +2 powers on the OSC because of the, you guys have added, client cores onto that, I guess.
Yeah, I think we just literally went and added every core of the service also as a core in SDK.
Yeah.
Nova Core, Manila Core, etc., etc.
Yeah. So do you expect any bottlenecking, like in case, like, right now it's the two of you taking care of the whole, common core of this.
Just understand right. You have +2 for Manila means, and honestly speaking, you are responsible for reviewing Manila stuff. It's not. It's definitely not the expectation that we as cores, as the ones with +2, +W, are also going to review all of this stuff. You know Manila code best, and you are technically responsible for making the CLI also for it.
Yeah, so the Neutron is the best example of this, because the Neutron devs, the likes of Adolfo and that, are they're very proactive in their OpenStack clients and their SDK work. I don't think we've ever been a bottleneck. I get pinged occasionally by one of the folks working on Neutron to review something. My reviews tend to be, does this look sensible from an OpenStack client, like a holistic OpenStack client perspective? Do I see any glaring issues? If not, then it's in. I wouldn't go much more thorough than that, because the expectation is that the Neutron team has already done that review for me.
All right.
I don't have the technical, like, I don't have the depth of knowledge in all the different services to be able to go much deeper than that. But I do have the ability to say, or to think about it at a higher level, we'll say, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think this makes sense for us, and this is how we wanted to approach it from the get-go. But I guess there was a lot of pushback at the time to try and use this plugin mechanism. So I like the direction that it's going. It kind of makes things easier within a deployment for sure, and for end users. Yeah, nothing further to say. I think I had a question. Is there any implication on the release model? Because OSC is relied upon by other clients. Do you guys like have? I have not looked at this closely, but do you actually end up releasing a couple of weeks before or something like that? Like, is it part of the library release by any chance?
As often as possible. That's
Okay.
more or less the strategy. But then we have really cut with libraries, I think.
Yeah. So we tie into library freeze, but we've effectively agreed that it's a soft freeze for us as opposed to a hard freeze. The reason being, we want to avoid, we won't, basically once that freeze has happened, we won't merge rework patches or reworks of existing features, for example. We won't merge patches that would switch from Nova client to SDK, for example. But we would merge things that would add support for new APIs. So new features, wholly new features, or wholly new, options for existing features or something like that, as opposed to modifications of existing features. Because the new ones, if they're broken, fine, they're broken. Nobody was using them before, and we can go and fix them. Whereas if we break something that currently works, that's a different issue, and that can cause gate issues as well, depending on the service. So that's how we've approached it. And since that policy came in, I think about 2 or 3 releases ago, after patches, I think there were patches for Nova that didn't get tested. There wasn't a cross-functional test for the particular, basically we had a condition that wasn't being tested in an OpenStack client's own gates, and we only hit it in Nova when the constraint got bumped. To avoid that happening, this is why we said no modifications. So
I see. Okay. So the reason I'm asking this also is because a lot of times at the very fag end of the release, we end up merging a couple of features, and then the people that are writing these features up are very much concerned about getting a CLI patch or an
yeah,
SDK patch as well in. And that's where we've never missed the client deadline. We've always hit the client deadline, and we've tried to get the features in. It's feature freeze and client deadline for a reason. But if it was to be 2 weeks earlier, because we're doing which going to be part of the OSC, then I think it changes things for people chasing that for a release.
yeah. You're no different from Nova or Neutron or any other project that's currently part of OpenStack Client proper. They all merge things, on the Thursday before code freeze, large things. We also have the ability to do backports of features if that that hasn't been an issue, but if it ended up being an issue, we can do that. We got a lot of flexibility here. The main thing is just to avoid breaking gates on that, Wednesday or Thursday before feature freeze, which is why we avoid doing large scale kind of refactorings of existing code. But new features are a different thing.
That's awesome. Yeah, that was the clarification I was hoping for. Thanks. That actually eases some things in my head, and also helps if we were to get if we were to miss something by a couple of weeks because something got a feature freeze exception, but the CLI was ready and it was just waiting on the API to merge. Um, and if it helps people think that okay, there is a chance that you could get this backported, and the reason that's very important is because I think distros end up pulling from a specific branch,
Yeah,
and if you don't really have that feature in that particular branch, it's not like they just go ahead and use the client from the next branch or something.
yeah,
I don't know why they wouldn't, but they find these very hard boundaries between releases, even for clients.
yeah, yeah. Understood. Yeah, no, there's no issues with regards to getting things in late and backporting things as needed over time as well.
Awesome. I love this proposal. So our AIs would probably be, I mean, we want to try to, I mean, I don't know if we want a timeline on this or how do we want to approach that?
Probably makes sense. I don't know if you want, would you need is there a spec of any advantage for this?
Not
The
needed. I think there's a lot of developer documentation around where we add our stuff, but
Yeah,
I don't think we've ever had a spec as such. I mean, we've had
okay,
a spec to try to add a OSC support, but that spec is ancient now. We must retire it and say it's all done.
yeah,
Um, yeah.
yeah. The big one, of course, is again I don't necessarily care about applying rough to other projects. The reason that I want to do it here is because it avoids me having to reformat the code when I add it to OpenStack client. And I want the ability to visually diff stuff, or for people to visually diff stuff as they're moving it across. There's a certain amount of trust that I'm copying stuff exactly as I got it from Manila client, but if it can be visually diffed, that makes that review process slightly easier again. So that patch, because it touches the entire code base, that will be a case of respinning that and getting it reviewed and merged like quickly, and then that's got for pretty much every other thing that's in there. Everything else that's open currently against Manila client. So I think that is probably something that we want to do as soon as possible to avoid us getting to the point near the end of the cycle when we're trying to cram things in and suddenly everything has gone into merge conflict because we merged this patch. So that's the one that I would probably give priority to, and I can go and respin that. The other stuff then it'll be I suspect it'll be more gradual as we can move each one of the entry points across. I tried doing it in a big bang thing and it was just too hard. So we'll do it entry point by entry point, merging stuff into OpenStack clients and disabling the loading of the Manila client equivalent. And then we have a whole load of new commands for students to start migrating across to SDK.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah. I love the proposal as well, and my concerns are pretty much the same as Gotham's, which is like around when can we merge stuff, or if we would be having like fewer weeks to get the changes in at the end of the cycle. But I understand that the like the policy that you guys have been implementing, and in our case, mostly when we do add stuff, it's not often something that we are refactoring. It's pretty much like new features that are getting added to the client. So at the end, yeah, we like the majority of the changes we've worked on in the past are pretty much new features. So yeah, this is pretty awesome. Thank you for bringing this up, and also like it's gonna be nice if we can get this done. I don't have anything else to add. Is there or are there any other questions for related to this topic?
The sooner you get JSON schemas complete, the sooner you will be able to get rid of maintenance of SDK and CLI as such.
Yeah, that's something very yeah, that's going to be a nice side effect. I agree.
Carlos, I have one question. Maybe it's a bit naive. Would the removal of the Manila command line, would that also include Manila manage as well, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Manila manage is utility added as part of the Manila installation itself. So it's under when you install Manila, and if you look at the Manila code base, there is like a CMD thing there, and then that CMD is the thing that we do the Manila dash manage. So the Manila manage is pretty much administrator operators and then operations, and then it works even if you don't have the Manila client installed. It should just like work regardless. If you have Manila installed, it should be fine.
Sure. Thanks.
No problem. Any other questions?
Not for me, no.
Awesome. Thanks for bringing this up, Stephen. Before we leave, I believe we should take a team picture. I'm stopping the recording for now.